right. You want to go first, Amy, or you want me to jump in?
I can go first. Hey
Okay.
everyone, how you doing? My name is Amy Gustafson. I'm the Assistant Director of Institutional Effectiveness and QEP. I am here because I have spent 10 years working in the library, doing a lot of searching there, and in my current role, I do so much searching in IER. And then as an ACA instructor, there are so many search techniques I want to use that I want to share with you. So I'm just really excited to be here today to talk about those things. So thanks for having me.
And I'm Samantha O'Connor, and I'm the director of the library. And years ago, when Amy was in the library, we worked together. And I think that she has a really good perspective on all of this search stuff that takes it outside of that, as a librarian, I kind of get into this view of how to teach students how to search. And I think that she brings so much perspective on how you, as faculty and staff, get to use it professionally. And there's so many just sort of little tips and tricks and magic tricks that we use to find things when we search that we're really excited to share with you. So thanks for being here.
Okay, you guys. So the first thing we get to talk about, I'm so excited, is about Google Basics. I'm sure everyone in this session has already done a lot of searching in Google, but I'm hoping to show you some things that are relevant to what you do in the college, some fun things that I just enjoy doing and researching. And then if you're an instructor, there are a lot of things that will help if you are an instructor or do other PD sessions. So I'm hoping that this will help all of you with that. And as I mentioned before, there's so many ways that you can search and to use Google in higher education. So let's go ahead and find out what that looks like. So give me just a second while I switch from here to our screen that we're going to look at for today. Because my plan is, and I think it's Samantha's plan too, is we are basically going to do live searches with you as opposed to just being here and looking at a PowerPoint. So give me just a second. Okay. Let me know if you guys can all see that now. Yeah, are we good? We see a Google page?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to talk about when we're searching Google is that quote marks are your friends. And the reason that I say this is if you search in Google, you can search for, any other number of words, on there, and they'll find any of those words, but they're not going to be any more or less important to Google. But if you use your quotation marks, it will say to Google that I only want you to find this very specific phrase that I'm looking for. So we're actually going to search for something called bombs over Goldsboro, and you might be wondering, what am I talking about with this? But I actually know that this is a very specific NCpedia article. And if you guys didn't know about this, on January 24th, 1961, an atomic bomb did drop near Goldsboro. And when it dropped, all but, let's see, one of the 7 layers of prevention actually went through. So there was only one thing stopping us from having a nuclear bomb going off in 1961 in Goldsboro. And the people of North Carolina were not told about this until 1992. So I find this is an interesting piece of North Carolina history that I like looking at, like researching about. One scary thing, and I don't know if anyone is reading this article, but there was one part of it that one piece of uranium that did break off, but they've never been able to find it to this day. They think it sank down into the soft, swampy earth. So that is one fun factoid for today. So long story short, remember that searching with quotation marks are your friends. So let's do another search that's a little bit closer to what we do in higher education. Next, we're going to look for a very specific article that we are looking at when we are looking for ways to help students with retention. So the economic case for mental health services in higher education. So if I just search for this topic without the quotation marks, let's see what happens. You can see that, you know, there are a lot of different article things that come up. And I think I just messed up Google. I should have done it the other way first, because a lot of other articles can come up if you don't put the quotation marks around it. And Google is getting smarter every day, so sometimes you don't need to do this, but this is something I find extremely helpful. So here we have the economic case for mental health services in higher education, and I'm trying to see, I think it's this first one. Yes, so now I have this article that talks about this very specific article that I'm looking at. So this is the first thing we're going to think about when searching in Google. The next thing that we're going to think about when we're searching in Google is searching by domain. So in other words, I can narrow my search just to things related to .edu web pages, .gov, .org, other countries if I felt like it. And this is important because sometimes I want really high quality information, or I want information from a certain standpoint, so .edu, or I want to look at like National Archive or things, so I'm looking at like .gov and things like that. So that's one thing you would do. And so you would do it type .org, and whatever your search terms are, you would stick them in the front of that. So it would be search terms, type.org. And you all, I just realized this might be really small, so I'm going to make this much, much bigger so everyone can see. So this is where you put your search terms, and then this is very important. It's got to be type colon and then dot whatever your extension is. So let's do a pretty complicated search using this. So I mentioned to you all, I use this every day when I'm working in IER, and there is one, or actually there are a few resources that I cannot get to easily because I can never remember where they're located on the CCCC website. And one of those is the Policies and Procedures Manual. So if I type in Policies and Procedures and then type in site.cccc.edu, or actually I don't even need the dot before that one, just cccc.edu, and then I hit search. The very first thing that comes up is our Policies and Procedures Manual, because I told Google to search Policies and Procedures in site cccc.edu. And this is helpful because if you did the same search on the CCCC website, you oftentimes get a lot of news articles as opposed to more the meat of what you're looking for. So this is really, really helpful. Another one that I use for the CCCC website is Cougar Bytes, because I can never remember where it's located besides looking at it in my email. So I can do Cougar Bytes site cccc.edu, and it comes up with our most recent one. So this is going to be really, really helpful for you all. So we looked at quote mark searching, we're looking at domain searching, and so that's searching with a .edu or with an entire website. Let's look at one more before we head on to our next one. So we can also look at community college organization, and then site.org, because we're looking for an organization related to community colleges. So now we have these different organizations related to working in a community college. And if you throw in teaching in there, you get a very specific organization where it's, let's see, .org. And then it's related to, this one is the National Association of Community College Teachers. So that is really, really helpful. So again, we did searching with quote marks and then domain examples. Now we're going to go on to file type searching, which is one of my favorite types of searching. So sometimes you know that there's a PDF out on the internet or a PowerPoint or something that you know that exists that you want to find, right? I have this problem all the time. So when I was teaching ACA, when I first started teaching, I wanted to know what were the best practices for community college teaching. So I did my search, community college teaching best practices. And then I did site, because I want it to come from an EDU site, because I want to make sure that these are other educators talking to me. And I said type colon dot PDF. And then I did my search. And so now you're going to see that all the results we have are all PDFs, and they all only come from .edu websites. And the very first one we're going to look at is Clemson's, because this one is pretty interesting and I actually like this one a lot. So this is a brief summary of the best practices in college teaching. And although it's college teaching in general, it's written by someone that's from the North Seattle Community College system. And so I feel like they did a really, really, really good job putting this document together. So it's got lecture practices, it's got group discussion triggers, it's got thoughtful questions. So this can be very, very helpful to you all if you are teaching or doing professional development. And you can see that it is 14 pages long. So that's going to be very helpful for finding new information. So let's go back. The next one we're going to look at is, teaching ACA. We have to do some presentations on the Myers-Briggs personality test, and I didn't know a ton about that, and I wanted to see how other people were teaching this. So I typed in Myers-Briggs personality test, and then again I made my site.edu, so site:/.edu, and then type this time was :.ppt. And this finds PPT and PPTX, so the next level up of PowerPoint. And you can see right away that we have a PowerPoint on the Myers-Briggs from Kansas University, from Hawaii, down the road at NC State. So these are all things that you can use to see how other people are talking about topics in your area. So I hope that's really helpful. As far as file types go, there are all different types that you can search for. You can say search for type.exe. You can search for a document, and you can search for, let's see, what else can you search for? MP3s. The world is your oyster as far as this file type searching option. The next thing that we're going to look at is we're going to have a little bit of fun with Google. So we are going to look at how you can do some image searching. I think we all do image searching a little bit with Google. So from the main Google page, you can come up to images, and you can just do some basic searches. And one search that I've done recently, because I wanted a graphic to be able to show people, is I wanted something on equity, and then I want it to be site, again, :.edu. Because I wanted to see how other people in the educational field were talking about equity. Because when I searched for equity in general, without adding the site.edu, there's a lot of things being said in the business world, but not necessarily things that I wanted to see from education. So this was a great way for me to be able to narrow down some great equity images. So the other thing that I really like about image searching is I can search for, and actually let me make this a little bit smaller so you guys can see a little bit better. So if I come over here to tools, and so it's all the way over on this line, settings, tools, right over here, when I click this, it comes up with all these different things down here on the bottom, so we can search in different ways. One, we can tell it how large, small, or if we want it to be an icon, so what size we want it to be. We can tell it what color we want it to be, if it's any color, black and white, transparent. And the transparent part can be really important if you're putting something into a newsletter or on a web page. So just remember that transparent background is actually very helpful. Next, you can search by type. I often do not want clip art, so I want to look for something else like a line drawing, and GIFs are always fun, so that's a type you can narrow by. Next is time. So this is the time frame when it was posted. So if something happened in current events, you can choose something that's a little bit more recent. And then last, this is the most important one to me, especially in higher education. You can use a Creative Commons license. And I don't know if everyone knows a ton about this, and Samantha knows a lot more about this than I do, so she'll talk more about it later. But basically, it's the idea is if you choose something like this, and we search for it for something, we can use this in higher education. So I'm just going to use something that's like pretty basic. So we're going to say congratulations, Creative Commons license. And I have actually used this when I've been putting things in newsletters that are going outside of the college, because I don't want to get in trouble that we've used something that is for commercial use, because I don't have the money to pay for it. And I don't want the college to get sued. So Creative Commons licenses are really, really helpful if you want to use that. And the next thing is, if you want to clear your selections, you can come over to this clear button and just hit clear, and then you're back to all of your normal searching options before that. Now, before we head away from images, there is one last image search that I'm not sure everyone is aware of, but I think is really cool. So we're going to go back to that Google page, and we're going to click on images in the upper right-hand corner. And we're going to come down to this photograph. So it says search by image. And here I could paste a URL in to start an image, or I can upload an image. And I've actually already uploaded an image for you all to save some time. This is a picture of mine from the Grand Prismatic Spring from Yellowstone. We went on a trip a number of years ago. So right away, it automatically told me that this is what it was. You guys can't see it, but once it popped up here, it guessed that it was the Grand Prismatic Spring, which it is. And then it has, information about it, and then more pictures. But I was kind of grumpy about this because I wanted information from Yellowstone from the US government as opposed to a more commercial website, so I saw that.com. So I was even able to come up here and say site:/.gov. And now I only have .gov responses. And so if I click on this, it takes me to a web page that's all about the Grand Prismatic Spring. I don't know if you guys can see that, but these are all these tiny little people walking on this boardwalk, and it's 370 feet across, and it's a giant hot spring. It's the largest in Yellowstone. So this is helpful if you want to search for different images. Now, I did try this, and I hope this doesn't bother anyone. I did try this with a snake, but Google wasn't smart enough to tell me that the copperhead in my photograph was a copperhead. It just kept telling me it was a serpent. So it still has a ways to go, but it's getting there. Oh, and the only other thing is, if you upload this, I don't know what happens to it. I don't know if Google keeps it forever. They might. So just keep that in mind if you don't want a picture of yours to show up forever in the future. But that is an option. Something else that we can look at that's fun as far as using Google, and let's go back to regular Google, is actually searching by videos. And let's see. I'm just going to search for the word happy because I can't think of anything else right now. So we had dictionary definition. But really what I want to show you is, okay, so we have all here for searching. We have images. So if you click that, you only find images. And then if I click videos, it's going to be the same thing if we come over here to the tools. And actually, this is hilarious because I was actually thinking of the Pharrell Williams music video. So I'm glad that that came up when happy came up. So that's pretty funny. So let's do something more helpful, like maybe North Carolina history. And I'm going to put North Carolina quotes and then history, and then search that way. So now we have more videos that are just about North Carolina history. And if I click on the tools over here on the right-hand side underneath the search magnifying glass, I have different ways of narrowing the search again. So I can say it's any duration, but we all know if we're presenting this in class, it probably needs to be pretty short. So now it's 0 to 4 minutes. Anytime, this is when it was posted, but that's not important to me in this case. Quality, I would really like high quality videos. So we've switched from any quality to high quality. All videos, this is really important. If we're showing something in class, we need to be closed captioned already. So you can choose closed captioned. And now we only have all of the history videos about North Carolina that are closed captioned. And then source, it can tell you the major sources that are popping up for these videos and then narrow it down from there. We know that there's the NCDNCR, so that's the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So this is a good place to find things. So these are some options as far as searching for videos. Now, to round off our searching with Google for some more fun things, we're going to head back to the Google page. And most of this actually isn't searching. It's just some tips to help you if you're teaching. So I don't know if everyone knows, but you can do set timer for 5 seconds. And then it's already going. But the interesting thing about this is it will not bing if you stay here. You actually have to make it bigger and then hit reset in order for the bing to happen. So we will give it just a second. Actually, if I hit start, we'll give it a second to bing, and then we will head back to the next thing that we are going to look at. So we say OK, and then in order to get out of here, we're going to hit F11 and then come back. So we can come back from that big screen back here if we've lost everything up there. So that's pretty helpful. The next thing I'm going to mention is Google Translate. And you might be wondering, why am I going to mention Google Translate? Well, I can tell you that I've used Google Translate on a number of occasions at CCCC. The most recent one was maybe 2 years ago. It was orientation where people went from station to station, and I was manning a station by myself, and a family of 3 came up, a daughter and 2 parents. Well, the daughter went off somewhere, and I was there by myself, and both of the parents were there, but they didn't speak English. They only spoke Spanish. I unfortunately do not speak Spanish. I only speak French. That was a big mistake. I wish I could go back and change that. But they were speaking Spanish, and so I was able to bring up Google Translate and ask them things on Google Translate and translate it to them, and then they could use the reverse one to put it in Spanish and then put it back in English, and I was able to help students that way. So Google Translate is your friend, and it works on your phone. So it's pretty easy. So we're going to say that we want to switch it to Spanish, and you can see that it has all these different languages, and I think it automatically detects, but we're just going to switch it to English in this case. So we're going to say, hello, how can I help you? Okay, and so we can use this on our phones to help students. And then the very last thing that I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to Samantha is the random number generator. And I actually use this a lot. I use it in class, I use it in presentations to help randomly select people to talk about things, winners of prizes, and I will be honest, we use this a lot to determine what episodes of TV we're going to watch. So we choose the season, and then we change the numbers to choose the episode because we can't make up our own minds. So it will randomly generate a number, and you can choose the maximum as high as you want to go and then hit generate. And I think this is something that could be helpful in class. So that is going to be my section of getting started with this. Next, we're going to get into some really interesting and really in-depth ways of searching with Samantha, because as you guys know, our librarians are a font of knowledge, and they know how to do all these amazing things that change almost on a daily basis. So I look forward to hearing what Samantha has to say. So Samantha, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll let you take over.
Thank you. So yeah, Amy had a lot of information that, like, some of the things that she showed were not even things that I was really familiar with before. So I learned a lot in our discussions about getting ready for this presentation, and a lot of just kind of like fun and useful tricks that you can use. I am going to be less fun, and I'm going to talk about some of the kind of deeper ways that you can use Google to search for things, to supplement some of the work that you do in your classes. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about Boolean operators. So let me share my screen. And Boolean operators, most of you have probably used them at some point. Some of you might be more familiar with them than others. Here we go. But really what I think I mostly want to talk about is the idea that the logic behind them is kind of the important part. When you're talking about Google or even the library resources at this point, these search engines have gotten so smart that you don't necessarily need Boolean operators anymore. Google especially can really infer what you're trying to do just by the context of how you're writing it. But I still think it's useful to know what these operators do and to know how they work, because it helps you to figure out really what you are searching for. And what you'll find when you're trying to do a search and you're just sort of overwhelmed with resources and responses to your search is that if you know exactly what you're looking for and you're able to really just hone it down to those specific key indicators of what you're looking for, you're going to get much more targeted results. It's less stuff for you to have to weed through. So even if you don't end up using the operators in your search, thinking about how your pieces fit together can help you craft a better search. So Boolean operators are basically and, or, and not. And is the operator that allows you to create a really wide search. So we could look for, say, nutrition and diet. And my husband started a diet yesterday, so that's all I'm hearing about in my house right now. So we could do this, and this is basically going to do a search for both of these. Now, as I said before, search engines are smart enough to infer this. If I do nutrition diet, I'm going to get basically the same results. You know, there may be a few differences here and there, but for the most part, Google knows that I'm looking for both of these terms equally. What is a little bit more helpful is if you are searching for two terms that are very similar and you don't care which one you get, searching for the two terms linked with or is actually going to create a much wider search. So, and I think before I said widen, I apologize for that, I meant narrow. When you use and, it basically looks for both of those terms together. So every website that came up in my search had both nutrition and diet used in that website. Now I'm looking for websites that have either. So this is a larger search. Now in this particular case, these things are so interconnected in the way that we talk about them and write about them that there's probably not a lot of websites out there that say the word nutrition without saying the word diet, and not very many that say the word diet without the word nutrition. So the or probably didn't do a whole lot more than the and did. But if I did something a little bit more disparate, let's say I am researching getting a pet for my family and I don't know what type of pet I want. I could look for cats or dogs, two totally separate things. And when I look for both of them, I get information about both of them. So I like the or operator quite a lot, and I use it a lot when I'm doing research with students. But there's one more that I don't use much in my daily research with students, but that's super, super helpful. And for that one, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to set up my at the same time. My original search for nutrition or diet, and this time I'm going to put it in parentheses because I want that or to apply to both of those terms, but I'm going to add something new, and I want that something new to apply to both of the terms individually. And that is weight loss. I am going to remove weight loss from my search for nutrition or diet. That's probably going to make a really huge difference because most of the websites that have the words nutrition and diet in them are going to include the term weight loss somewhere, and I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to tell Google I don't want any websites that have the words weight loss in them. And in library resources, you use the word not. So just like I did my and my or in all caps, you would use the word not in all caps. In Google, you actually use a little minus sign. So I have removed weight loss, and while I still got over 1 billion results, you can see right away that this is a different set of results because I'm not getting originally that nutrition or diet search came up with all these images of food. We got an ad for Noom right off the bat. Right now, what I'm seeing are things like Medline Plus and nutrition.gov. So these are going to be much more related to sort of the science of nutrition, towards sort of healthy living, as opposed to companies that may be looking to get you to sign up to lose weight. Especially, you know, January 5th, we're going to see a lot of those without this weight loss indicator. So by removing that, I've changed my search results. I said at the beginning that the Boolean operators don't really make a huge difference with today's search engines. The not one still does. So if you have, let's say you're looking for a new car and you are really excited to buy a hybrid, but you really, really don't want a Prius, you could say hybrid, not Prius. And this is going to bring up, well, actually, this brings up a lot of stuff about the word hybrid. So we're going to put hybrid car. And so I'm going to get a lot of stuff about hybrid cars. And what I'm going to see are things about the cars in general. And I'm going to also get lists of great cars that don't happen to be Priuses. So that can be a useful way to kind of narrow down a search. If you are finding that every result that you get has the same information over and over and you're tired of seeing that information, you can remove that information to redo your search and see what else is out there that may be getting buried under sort of the deluge of stuff that you have about a major term. So I find the not really helpful. And I said at the beginning that it's really useful to think about the logic behind this. And one of the reasons for that is that usually when we're using Google, we're going to be doing natural language searches. We're going to be searching for, you know, what kind of pet should I get? And Google knows how to take that and turn that into a useful result. However, when I want to do a real search, especially when I'm looking for something for work or something that I'm going to share with a student, it's going to be much more useful if I really think about, well, I don't just want to know what type of pet I should get. I want to think about, well, what's right for me? I should get a pet that's good with kids. I should get a pet that doesn't have too much energy because I don't have time to walk it 5 times a day. And so thinking about all of the different aspects of what I'm looking for and then linking those together using Boolean operators is going to get me a better search, regardless of whether or not the Boolean operators make a difference. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm breaking down my search and thinking about discrete pieces of it, which creates a much more targeted result. So pets and kids and low energy is going to get me something way more targeted to my needs and over 1 billion less results than I had before. So it's going to be a lot easier for me to target down to those websites that help me. So that's kind of my spiel about Boolean operators. What I'm talking about here, obviously we're talking about it in the context of Google. This stuff does work within the library resources as well, though in that case you're going to spell out not rather than using the little dash. The other thing that I'm going to show you within Google is Google Scholar. And so for those of you who have brought their students into a library instruction session and students have asked about Google Scholar, you've heard me kind of maybe steer students away from it. And I want to be really clear that the reason that I don't send students to Google Scholar usually is not because it's a bad source. It's because it is more difficult to use than the library. The library has a lot of tools built in to make it very useful for students. That's what it was developed for. Google Scholar has fewer tools, basically, which makes it a little bit harder to work with when you're kind of at that student level. However, if you are looking for something that you've been unable to find within the library, or you're just curious to see what's out there beyond what we own, Google Scholar is a really great source, and it's something that I use a lot. So if I get students who are looking for something that they haven't been able to find, this is where we go to look for it. It's just harder to use, so I don't necessarily send students to it alone. Additionally, one thing that you're going to come up with in Google Scholar is that you're going to hit paywalls. This is searching the web for scholarly information. Not all of that information is freely available. So you're going to come up with citations for articles that you can't access unless you pay money. And I don't want students to feel like they have to pay to get information. And I don't want you to think that either. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do to avoid those fees. So let's do a search for community colleges or junior colleges. So in this case, I'm using those quote marks that Amy talked about to make sure that community colleges and junior colleges come up as specific phrases and not just as two disparate words where, you know, I may come up with articles about junior year in college and what that experience is like, or articles about colleges in underprivileged communities or something like that, which is not necessarily what I'm looking for. I really specifically want those concepts of community college or junior college. And then of course I'm using my or Boolean operator so that I can look for either, because these terms are often used interchangeably and I don't necessarily have a preference for one or the other. So I'm going to do this search and you'll see that I got 18,000 results. Now, had I done this in regular Google, a lot of these results would have come up, but there probably would have been over 1 million because they would have been mixed up with all of the just websites that use these terms. So in this case, I've narrowed it down to just these scholarly articles or book chapters. Now, the other thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is that a lot of this stuff, like I'm looking here, the second article is from 1994. A little bit has changed in community colleges since 1994, just like a touch. So one thing that I'm going to do is come over here to the left to this date range, and I don't need things to be like published this year, but I do want them fairly recent. So I'm going to just narrow that range down to 2017. And you'll see that I did lose about 2,000 articles there, so that did help. I said earlier that one reason I don't send students to Google Scholar is because it really lacks those tools that we have within the library resources, and this is what I'm talking about. On the left-hand menu here, you basically have that ability to reduce the date, and then you have the ability to include or exclude patents and the citations tool. That's it. There are some things that you can do you know, using those same tools that Amy talked about, where you can maybe limit the domains that things are coming from. That's less useful here because when you're talking about scholarly information, it's usually not published on, you know, university websites. It's published on the publisher's website. So if a journal is published by Springer, it's going to come up at springer.com. So if I limit my search to a .edu, that's not actually going to get me to scholarly articles very easily. It may get me to a few because professors will often have theirs articles they've written hosted on their websites, or some colleges own presses. So we still may get to that, but it's not necessarily going to be a really helpful way to limit it. So unfortunately, Google, one of the limitations of Google Scholar is that it just doesn't have a lot of those tools built in to make it more agile, like what we see with Summon in the library. However, it can be super useful because it does get you to these things that the library simply doesn't own. Some of these are going to be just open source things, which are wonderful. You can access them immediately. Some of them, you're going to have to basically pay to access, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So let's say I want to come to this academic performance and community colleges, the influences of part-time and full-time instructors, and click on that because it sounds really interesting and exactly what I want to look. And oh, actually this was a bad example because this one's freely online. I wanted to show you what it looks like when you hit a paywall, but this is what it looks like when you don't hit a paywall, so that's great too. So like I said, this is going to get you to some things that you're not going to find through library searches because they're freely available on the web. But it's also going to get you to some things that are, you know what, I don't know why I'm only getting these things that I can actually get to. It's because I excluded the citations thing. So if I include citations, that basically means that all that comes up is the citation itself and not the full article. So I'm going to re-include that so that I can show you a paywall. So let's come down here to this one on major switching. Yep, there we go. So this one wants me to buy the article for $39.95. Does anyone want to pay $40 to read this article? My guess is probably no. So what should you do instead? Any ideas? Does anybody want to unmute themselves and take a guess?
Can I guess?
You may guess.
Would you use interlibrary loan?
you would use interlibrary loan. So honestly, just email me and say, hey, I found this article on Google and I want to read it, and I'll get it for you. If you want to be more, follow the standard procedures, you can go to cccc.edu to the library, and you can come down here and click on the interlibrary loan tab. And then you can fill out a form to request the article. It's going to ask you for information about the title and author and publication date and everything. And I do absolutely appreciate that, because it means I'm getting you the exact thing that you want. But you can also just email me, take this link, and put that link into the email, and I'll also get you the exact thing you want. So it's really up to you how you want to make that request. And I'm more than happy to fulfill that request no matter how you get it to me, because it's, it's one of the major things that I want to make sure that you're doing, is you're getting access to the information that you need without having to pay for it. And so really this just means that I'm going to be going out to other libraries that have access to this article, that we have agreements with, that we can borrow things from them, and they will send me a copy. It's all completely copyright legal. We have all kinds of agreements that allow it to happen. So Google Scholar is super useful. You just have to be sure that you're aware of the paywall situation, to make sure that you're never paying for something when you don't need to, and that you're just, that you're accessing it and using it. Whenever have any questions about it, if you're ever trying to find something on Google Scholar, maybe something that you have seen before and you know it's out there but you can't find it again, please come see me, because I'm more than happy to dig through stuff with you or for you. So that's basically what I wanted to show you about Google Scholar, but I also want to spend just a few minutes, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but just a few minutes talking about OER, because I know a lot of you are starting to sort of dip your toes into that, or some of you have already dived into that. But OER really intersects with this a lot, because Google is one of my key ways of tracking down OER for you. So when an instructor comes to me and says, hey, I need a textbook for this course for OER, sometimes I will go to one of the repositories that's out there, but oftentimes I'll start with a Google search. So I'm just going to show you sort of briefly my tips for searching for OER via Google, and that's not Google, that's CCCC. All right, so if I were to search for, let's say, a nutrition textbook OER, I could just type in nutrition textbook, and what do I get? I do get some stuff. An OER came up like right off the bat, so that's pretty cool. But I also get, the Amazon link for a different textbook. I get stuff from different professional organizations. I get things from McGraw-Hill. This isn't what I'm looking for. Now, I could put in OER as a search term, and that's going to get me some things too. I'm getting stuff from libraries linking out to OER for nutrition. I'm getting stuff from universities on stuff about OER. But there's a lot of stuff in the world of OER that I say is hidden in plain sight, which basically means it's out there and it fulfills all of the requirements of being an OER, in that it is licensed for reuse, it is free, it is educational in nature, and it is some sort of resource that somebody could theoretically use to teach. That's all it needs to be OER. And so there are things out there that fulfill that aren't labeled OER. So putting in the search for OER, while it gets me things, doesn't get me everything. So instead, what I'm going to do is one of the things Amy showed you, and I'm going to start by doing a site.edu, and then I am going to do a type.pdf. And so this has got me down to things from educational institutions in PDF format. And then I'm going to come here to tools. Oh, I can't do it from here. So instead I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to go into advanced search. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm going to show you down here, usage rights is the final thing on the advanced search page. and I can come here and I can choose free to use or share, or my favorite, free to use or share or modify. If it is free to use or share or modify, that means that it has a Creative Commons license applied to it that allows you to, as long as you attribute it to the creator, allows you to do what you want with it. So let's say you find a textbook that's right, but maybe not quite right. You can modify that. Or you find a PowerPoint that you want to turn into a handout. You can do that because it is licensed for modification. So unfortunately, in this particular one, not a lot of great matches for my search, and it's something weird with the PDF, so I'm just going to remove that, and that might help. And so I'm right off the bat, I get something from Galileo, which is one of the original kind of repositories. It's from Georgia for OER. I'm getting stuff from Hawaii. I've got a lot of stuff right off the bat that I'm really excited about. So this is one of the ways that I'm going to search for OER when I get those requests. Obviously, I'm still encouraging you when you're starting to look at OER to come see me and we can find things together. I'm not telling you you're on your own, but I wanted to show you some of the tricks that I use. And then the final thing I want to do is just go take a look at the library really quick and see how some of the things we've talked about today apply within a search here. So obviously the reverse image search and the video duration search and all that is unfortunately not an option within the library search tools. But the Boolean operators and the quote marks and things like that are. So for those of you who are not super familiar with the library research tools that we have, the main one we have is Summon. And Summon is basically, it's the search engine for the library. It searches all of the resources we have at once. And I'm going to show you really quick, if I don't put anything in this box, I'm going to show you what we have. This is going to basically bring up every single thing available online through the library, and it takes a little while because there's a lot of it. Today, we have 1,035,783,534 ebooks, scholarly articles, newspaper articles, reference entries from encyclopedias, streaming videos, basically you name it. If it's a library resource that we have, then it is part of this 1 billion plus set of results. Let's be a little bit more specific and let's look again for nutrition in here. And I'm going to show you how this differs from Google Scholar, because I'm going to come over here to these limiters on the side here. And in addition to publication date, which I can still do, I can also say that I'm only interested in things that have been through peer review, that have been published in journals, and that are published in things related to diet and clinical nutrition as a discipline. And there's more that I can do besides those, but those are sort of the big hitters. And this is going to give me articles. It's going to give me recommendations of specific databases that you can go in and look at more specifically. It's going to, in some cases, give me these wonderful little reference entries on the side, just in case I need a little help with definitions. It's going to suggest related topics, and it's going to give you a chat box where you can contact me directly or Grace Wolf at our Harnett campus and get help if you don't see things that make sense to you. One other thing that I want to point out that I think is really cool, because I'm a big nerd, if not every article has it, but if you see these that have this cited by link, if you click on this, this is going to give you a list of every article that we have indexed that cites the original article that I was looking at. So that can be a really cool way to kind of build on a search that you've done. If you find an article you like, finding articles that cite that can kind of help you take that next step. If you have to do a lit review, say for your PhD, or even just to start the process of applying for a grant, this is a really good way to get started on that lit review. This is going to help you find a lot of stuff. The big thing is to know that you can come contact me. I'm not just here for students, but I can also help you find these things if you need more help. But this is also a great way that you can just dive in and get started yourself, just to see what's out there. And I believe that that is what we have. I believe that's pretty much our time too. So let me stop sharing my screen. And I think we are all set.
Do you all have any questions for us before we depart? I'm so glad that you liked it. I think Samantha and I had so much fun talking about this and putting it together because we really like searching and finding things.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Yes. Oh, you're welcome, you guys. Good.
Thank you all so much for being here. It was great to know that so many people were interested in learning more about this.
And I think we've said it before, but I'll say it again. The library is a really great resource for you and your students. And there are things that librarians can find for you that you wouldn't even think that they could find for you. So there's no question you shouldn't ask, in other words. So, yeah.
And as we said, we had fun putting this together because we have fun searching. So you're never bothering us by asking for help with stuff like this. We like to do it.
It is so much fun.
I have one quick question. Can we really depend on Google's information being true?
Well, so Google itself isn't creating the information. So what you need to do is think about whether or not the source that you get to through Google is trustworthy. And so one of the things that we showed you, the site limiter, can help with that a lot. You know, you can sort of limit the types of domains you're getting stuff from, but even that is not like, there can be educational institutions that publish something that turns out not to be true. And a lot of people think there's a lot of trustworthy stuff on .org sites, but that isn't true at all because anybody can be a .org. Flat earthers have a .org website. So it's really kind of up to you when you find information to look at it critically and not just take it at face value. One of the things that I tell students to think about is to look at how recent it is. Is it something that is up to date, or could the information become out of date? To look at whether or not it contradicts the other things that you've heard about it. If you have heard the same thing from multiple sources, and then you read one source that tells you something different, that one source might be something to look at skeptically. And, you know, also just, if it's coming, evaluate what else is on the website. If everything else seems a little wacky and off the wall, perhaps the piece of information that you found is also less trustworthy. Whereas if you found something, say, from the Smithsonian or from National Geographic, these are major, well-known and well-regarded sources that are a little bit more trustworthy than some guy's blog about the same topic. That makes sense.
And the other thing, oh, and I just wanted to mention one more thing. The one thing that I forgot to mention about .edu sites is students can often have their own web pages on .edu sites. And so looking at who the author actually is important, because one of the, when I was researching the bombing for Goldsboro, someone really likes that from the University of Chicago, but they are a student, so we cannot use that one. So I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. This was very useful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I think they're asking stop recording, so let me do that.